Section 20 of T. DeWitt Talmage as I Knew Him. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mary Ann. T. DeWitt Talmage as I Knew Him by Thomas DeWitt Talmage. Milestone 13, Part 1. The longer I live, the more I think of mercy. 56 years of age, and I had not the slightest suspicion that I was getting old. It was like a crisp, exquisitely still autumn day. I felt the strength and buoyancy of all the days I had lived merging themselves into a joyous anticipation of years and years to come. For a while I had cherished the dream that I might some day visit the Holy Land, to see with my own eyes the sky, the fields, the rocks, and the sacred background of the divine tragedy. The tangible plans were made, and I was preparing to sail in October 1889. I felt like a man on the eve of a new career. The fruition of the years past was about to be a great harvest of successful work. I speak of it without reserve, as we offer prayers of gratitude for great mercies. Everything before me seemed finer than anything I had ever known. Few men at my age were so blessed with the vigor of health, with the elixir of youth. To the world at large I was indebted for its appreciation, its praise sometimes, its interest always. My study in Brooklyn was a room that had become a picturesque starting point for the imagination of kindly newspaper men. They were leading me into a new element of celebrity. One morning, in my house in Brooklyn, I was asked by a newspaper in New York if it might send a reporter to spend the day with me there. I had no objection. The reporter came after breakfast. Breakfast was an awkward meal for the newspaper profession, otherwise we should have had it together. I made no preparation, set no scene, gave the incident no thought, but spent the day in the usual routine of a pastor's duty. It is an incident that puts a side light on my official duties as a minister in his home, and for that reason I refer to it in detail. Some of the descriptions made by the reporter were accurate and illustrative of my home life. My mail was heavy, and my first duty was always to take it under my arm to my workshop on the second floor of my home in South Oxford Street. In doing this I was closely followed by the reporter. My study was a place of many windows, and on this morning in the first week of 1888 it was flooded with sunshine, or as the reporter, with technical skill, described it, a mellow light. The sun is always mellow in a room whenever I have read about it in a newspaper. The reporter found my study an unattractive room, because it lacked the signs of luxury or even comfort. As I was erroneously regarded as a clerical Croesus at this time, the reporter's disappointment was excusable. The Gobelin tapestries, the Raphael paintings, the Turkish divans, and the gold and silver trappings of a throne-room were missing in my study. The reporter found the floor distressingly hard but polished wood. The walls were painfully plain, all white. My table, which the reporter kindly signified as a big one, was drawn up to a large window. Of course, like all tables of the kind, it was littered. I never read of a library table in a newspaper that was not littered. The reporter spied everything upon it at once: letters, newspapers, books, pens, ink bottles, pencils, and writing paper, all of which, of course, indicated intellectual supremacy to the reporter. The chair at my table was stiff-backed, and, amazing fact, it was without a cushion. In front of the chair, but on the table, the reporter discovered an open book, which he concluded showed that the great preacher had been hurriedly called away. In every respect it was a typical literary man's den. Glancing shrewdly around, the reporter discovered bookshelves around the walls, books piled in corners and even in the middle of the room. Also a newspaper file was noticed, and, careless creature that I am, there were even bundles of old letters tied with strings thrown carelessly about. The reporter then said, "He told me that this was his workshop," and looked me in the face, with a merry twinkle in his eye, to see whether I was surprised or pleased. Then I asked the reporter to sit down, which he promptly did. I was closely watched to see how I opened my mail. Nothing startling happened. I just opened letter after letter. Some I laid aside for my secretary, others I actually attended to myself. A letter from a young lady in Georgia asking me to send her what I consider the most important word in my vocabulary, I answered immediately. The ever-watchful reporter observes that to do this I pick up a pen and write on the margin of the girl's letter the word helpfulness. Then I sign it and stick it in an envelope. Then I dash off the address. Obviously I am not at all original at home. I replied to a letter from the president of a theological seminary asking me to speak to his young men. I like young men, so I agreed to do so if I can. I startle the reporter finally by a sudden burst of unexpected hilarity over a letter from a man in Pennsylvania who wants me to send him a check by return mail for $100,000 on a sure thing investment. The reporter says, I am startled by a shrill peal of laughter, and the great preacher leans back in his chair and shakes his sides. The reporter looks over my shoulder and sees other letters. A young minister writes to say that his congregation is leaving him. How shall he get his people back? An old sailor scrawls on a piece of yellow paper that he is bound for the China Seas, and he wants a copy of each of Dr. Talmage's sermons sent to his old wife in New Bedford, Massachusetts, while he is gone. Here is a letter in a schoolgirl's hand. She has had a quarrel with her first lover, and he has left her in a huff. How can she get him back? Another letter is from the senior member of one of the biggest commercial houses in Brooklyn. It is brief, but it gives the good doctor pleasure. The writer tells him how thoroughly he enjoyed the sermon last Sunday. The next letter is from the driver of a horse car. He has been discharged. His children go to Dr. Talmage's Sunday school. Is that not enough to show that the father is reliable and steady, and will not the preacher go at once to the superintendent of the car line and have him reinstated? Here is a perfumed note from a young mother who wants her child baptized. There are invitations to go here and there, and to speak in various cities. Young men write for advice. One with the commercial instinct strongly developed wants to know if the ministry pays. Still another letter is from a patent medicine house, asking if the preacher will not write an endorsement of a new cure for rheumatism. Other writers take the preacher to task for some utterance in the pulpit that did not please them. Either he was too lenient or too severe. A young man wants to get married, and writes to know what it will cost to tie the knot. A New York actress, who has been an attendant for several Sundays at the Tabernacle, writes to say that she is so well pleased with the sermons that she would be glad if she could come earlier on Sunday morning, but she is so tired when Saturday night comes that she can't get up early. Would it be asking too much to have a seat reserved for her until she arrived? A maid in a white cap comes to the door and informs me that a room full of people are waiting to see me downstairs. It is the usual routine of my morning's work, when I receive all who come to me for advice and consolation. The reporter regards it, however, as an event, and writes about it in this way. Visitors to the Talmage mansion are ushered through a broad hall into the great preacher's back parlor. They begin to arrive frequently before breakfast, and the bell rings till long after the house is closed for the night. There are men and women of all races, some richly dressed, some fashionably, some poorly. Many of them have never spoken a word to Dr. Talmage before. They think that Talmage has only to strike the rock to bring forth a stream of shining coins. He steps into their midst pleasantly. Well, young man, he says to a youth of 17, who stands before him. He offers the boy his hand and shakes it heartily. I don't suppose you know me, says the lad, but I am in your Sunday school. Mother thinks I should go to work, and I have come to you for advice. Then follows in whispers a brief conversation about the boy himself, his parents, his education and mode of life. Now, says the preacher, leading him by the hand to the door, get a letter from your mother, and also one from your Sunday school teacher, and one from your day school teacher, and bring them to me. If they are satisfactory, I will give you a letter to a warm friend of mine who is one of the largest dry goods merchants in New York. If you are able, bright, and honest, he will employ you. If you are faithful, you may some day be a member of the firm. All the world is before you, lad. Be honest, have courage, roll up your sleeves and go to work, and you will succeed. Good-bye, and the door closes. The next caller is an old woman who wants the popular pastor to get her husband work in the Navy Yard. No sooner is she disposed of, with a word of comfort, than a spruce-looking young man steps forward. He is a book agent, and his glib tongue runs so fast that the preacher subscribes for his book without looking at it. As the agent retires, a shy young girl comes forward and asks for the preacher's autograph. It is given cheerfully. Two old ladies of bustling activity have come to ask for advice about opening a soup kitchen for the poor. A middle-aged man pours out a sad story of woe. He is a hard-working carpenter. His only daughter is inclined to be wayward. Would Dr. Talmage come round and talk to her? Finally, all the callers have been heard except one young man who sits in a corner of the room, toying with his hat. He has waited patiently so that he might have the preacher all alone. He rises as Dr. Talmage walks over to him. I'm in no hurry, he says. I'll wait if you want to speak to that man over there, pointing to me. No, is the reply. We are going out together soon. What can I do for you?" "Well, I can call again if you are too busy to talk to me now." "No, I am not too busy. Speak up. I can give you 10 minutes." "But I want a long talk," persists the visitor. "I'd like to oblige you," says the preacher, "but I am very busy today." "I'll come tomorrow." "No, I shall be busy tomorrow also." "And tonight too?" "Yes, my time is engaged for the entire week." "Well, then," says the young man in a stammering way, "I want your advice. I am employed in a big house in New York, and I am getting a fair salary. I've been offered a position on a rival house. Would it be right and honorable for me to leave? I am to get a little more salary. I must give my answer by tomorrow. I must make some excuse for leaving. I've thought it all over and don't know what to say. My present employers have treated me well. I want your advice." The good preacher protests that it is a delicate question to put to a stranger, even if that stranger happens to be a minister. "Is the firm a good one? Are you treated well? Haven't you a fair chance? Aren't they honorable men?" The answer to all these questions was in the affirmative. "But you could tell me whether it would be right for me to do it, and if I could get a letter of recommendation from you it would help me." "Why don't you ask your mother or father for advice?" "They are dead." "Was your mother a Christian?" "Yes." "Then get down on your knees here and lift your face to heaven. Ask your angel mother if you would be doing right." The young man's eyes fall to the floor. He toys nervously with his hat and backs out of the hall to the door. As he turns the knob he holds out his right hand to the preacher and whispers, "Thank you for your advice. I'll not leave my present employer." Now the great preacher hastily puts on a thick overcoat and, taking a heavy walking stick in his hand, says, "We'll go now." He calls a cheery good-bye to Mrs. Talmage and closes the big door behind him. The air is crispy and invigorating. Once in the street the preacher throws back his shoulders until his form is as straight as that of an Indian. His blue eyes look out from behind a pair of shaggy eyebrows. They snap and sparkle like a schoolboy's. The face denotes health and strength. The preacher is fond of walking and strides along with giant steps. The color quickly mounts to his cheeks and reveals a face free from lines and full of health and manly vigor. He has noted the direction that he is to take carefully. As he walks along the street he is noticed by everybody. His figure is a familiar one on the streets of Brooklyn. Nearly everybody bows to him. He has a hearty "How are you today?" for all. Our direction lies in a thickly populated section, not many blocks from the waterfront. It is in the tenement district where dozens of families are huddled together in one house. We pause in front of a rickety building and stop an urchin in the hallway who replies to the question that we are in the right house. Then the good doctor pulls out of his pocket the letter he received some hours ago from the grief-stricken young mother whose baby was ill and who asked for aid. Up flight after flight of stairs we go, 2 stories, 3, 4, 5. As we reach the landing a tidy young woman appears. She is holding her face in her hands and sobbing to break her heart. "Oh, I knew you would come," she says, as the tears roll down her cheeks. "I used to go to your church, and I know how deeply your sermons touched me. Oh, that was long ago. It was before I knew John and before our baby came." Here the speaker broke down completely. "But it is all over now," she began again. "John has ill-used me and beaten me and forced me to support him in drunkenness. I could stand all that for my baby's sake." She had sunk to the floor on her knees. She was pouring out her soul in agony of grief. "Oh, my baby, she cried piteously. "Why were you taken? Oh, the blow is too much. I can't stand it. Merciful Father, have I not suffered enough?" She fell in a heap on the floor. The heavy breathing and sobbing continued. We looked into the little room. It was scrupulously clean, but barren of furniture and even the rudest comforts of a home. The window curtains are pulled down, but a ray of bright sunshine shoots in, and lying on the apology for a bed is a babe. Its eyes are closed. Its face is as white as alabaster. The thin little hands are folded across its tiny breast. Its sufferings are over. The angel of death had touched its forehead with its icy finger, and its spirit had flown to the clouds. The end had come before the preacher could offer aid. What a scene it was! Here, in one of the biggest cities in the world, an innocent child had died of hunger, and because its mother was too poor to pay for medical attendance. A word or two was whispered in the mother's ear, and we passed down the creaking stairs to the street. The sun is shining brightly. A half-dozen romping children are on their way home to lunch. The business of the great city is moving briskly. It is Christmas week, and the air is redolent with the suggestions of good things to come and visions of Kris Kringle. Truck drivers are whipping their horses and swearing at others in their way. An organ grinder is playing "Sweet Violets" on a neighboring corner. Everyone in the streets is of smiling face and happy. The picture is not mine, nor could I have drawn one of myself, but it is a sketch illustrating the almost daily experiences of a "popular minister," as I was called. It was estimated that my weekly sermons, in all parts of the world, reached 180,000,000 people every Monday morning, the year 1888. This was gratifying to a man who, in his student days, had been told that he would never be fit to preach the gospel in any American pulpit. I thanked God for the great opportunity of His blessing. End of section 20.